We have chilling new video from the University of Arizona's campus and from inside the police interrogation room. On the day, investigators say Professor Thomas Meixner was shot and killed last October.
This is the first time we hear the suspect, an expelled student named Murad Dervish, speak about it. And perhaps the most incriminating thing he has said was after officers walked out of the room. True Crime Arizona's Brianna Whitney is here, and the suspect, was he forthcoming with information or no?
Not at all. In fact, he was pretty snarky with the officers who were in the room, almost taunting them at times. But a first-degree murder trial like this will rest on what is or is not admissible in court. And though officers left the interrogation room, the camera was still rolling, catching an unsettling admission.
At least I fulfilled my mission.
Left alone with his own thoughts, Murad Dervish making that disturbing comment just hours after he reportedly gunned down UA professor Thomas Meixner.
I am charging you with murder in the first degree. Oh, okay. You look surprised. You tell me of whom?
Dervish's bizarre interrogation interview, part of newly released video from that fateful day, including this surveillance footage in the halls of the Harshbarger building moments after shots rang out. Though these videos have no audio, you can see here someone running down the hall, another person peering out from behind a door for safety, and just a minute later, officers begin storming the hall, walking up and down with rifles, looking for the suspect, and searching for people still hiding inside. But Dervish had left and was eventually caught near Gila Bend trying to flee to Mexico. Dervish had recently been expelled and banned from campus for threatening behavior. Dervish was a grad student at the school, and Professor Thomas Meixner was the department head of his program. In his interrogation, Dervish says he doesn't want to answer questions without an attorney, but goes on to taunt and jeer the officer.
We have quite a bit of evidence. And I think you know what that evidence is. Well, it's a shame we can't talk. We seem like we have a lot in common. Going to UA and living in San Diego.
The officer says he would like to hear Dervish's side of the story, but the suspect has a snarky response to that request.
We found a gun in your car. I'm sure you would like to hear it. And you'll hear my story in court.
Now, because Murad Dervish had been read his Miranda rights before he said his quote, that he, quote, fulfilled his mission, that statement is admissible in court and likely would be used by prosecutors to establish premeditation. Law enforcement experts say leaving a suspect alone like that is often a technique to see what they'll say, just like this. So he's talking to himself there, and it's pretty interesting evidence.
So his father, Dervish's father, has spoken about his history of violence.
Yeah, honestly, it was sad when his father spoke out in October. It was about a week after the shooting. His father was very upset by the whole situation, just so sorry to the Meixner family. But he said that his own son had tried to kill his own family members. He had been in and out of prison because of it, and he called his son a ticking time bomb. So.
Yeah, and we know a lot of changes took place at the University of Arizona in the wake of this because there were a lot of red flags that were not caught, a lot of systemic changes at the university.
Definitely. There was things that came out that they should have been able to see that there was warning signs with Dervish. And unfortunately, you have to think, had they done more at the time, that Thomas Meixner would still be alive.
Yeah, just a horrible story.
Yeah.
More to come on this for sure. Right. Brianna, thank you.